Right now, we want to link up with our correspondent, Niyi, who is in Anambra as we speak. Niyi, good morning.
Good morning.
Good morning, Niyi. How is it in Anambra State?
Well, peaceful as it was during the election process. Everything is going on well. In fact, people are attending churches. If only you can pick the sounds of buildings around me. The churches are filled up. I don't know, maybe they're thanking God in advance, as one of them said earlier. But it's quite peaceful here. And surprisingly, because Anambra is one of the places where people were expecting some sort of violence. I spoke with one of the electorate yesterday, and he mentioned that maybe it's because of the arrest of the IPOB factional leader, Simon Ekpa, in Finland. But all in all, the electoral process was quite smooth. The only challenge was the fact that the INEC officials, some of them came late and people didn't start voting on time. And as at 6:37 yesterday, at some major polling units, people were still voting, and they didn't allow the INEC officials to leave either, said, until they perform the exercise, their franchise. And as even in terms of the beavers were working out. If I'm to rate them over 100%, I would say at least an 85%. Most of the beavers were working, and there was no issue whatsoever. And in terms of security, as I've mentioned, everything was calm. The people were their own security. But this morning, you can see everyone is just going about their normal duties, as if election didn't even happen yesterday. And the churches that we visited are filled up.
All right, that's one aspect of security. But how would you rate the performance of INEC in terms of arriving early and being functional?
Well, for Anambra State, I would say INEC was actually very prepared, because we visited most of the local governments where the materials had gotten to even before the election day, and the beavers was being charged. We saw them charged all over. We saw the materials being sorted. We saw everything being sorted. But it's just surprising that when we got to the polling units, the INEC officials had not gotten there. So I'm thinking it would be an issue of logistics, which cuts across not just Anambra State, but other states. And maybe it's also as a result of the cash flow. I wouldn't be able to determine that. But one thing is sure, they could have done better in terms of, I'm talking about INEC, they could have done better to ensure that their people get to all these polling units. And unfortunately, just to add, most of the polling units they came late to are polling units that have much electorate. Like in a compound, you can be having 3, but the ones where the officials actually came late are the ones where they have numbers. There are numbers of people there who are to vote, and this really slowed down the process. If we're talking about organization and how the process was managed and how the beavers was used, I would say INEC really tried, because they've put it, most of the cases they saw during the 2019 election was not there. And maybe because they've learned lessons from the mock accreditation exercise they performed recently before the election, maybe they've learned their lessons. So most of the beavers were working. For those who couldn't identify by fingerprints, they were able to use face recognition. But the challenge is they only had 1 per unit. According to what we observed, 1 per polling unit. So this raised a lot of concern. Yes, it was fast, but it was for a particular polling unit that has large numbers. It wasn't easy to really get it done as fast as they would have wanted. So the counting, the voting went into the night, and that made them even leave that particular polling unit very, very late.
All right, Niyi, we'll get back to you shortly. We have Bernard Akede also on standby. Bernard, good morning. Bernard in Kano State. Good morning, Bernard.
Good morning, Jakbo.
Good morning, Bernard.
Good morning. Can you hear me?
Yeah,
yes,
good morning.
I think that we're having that problem all around Nigeria right now, where some people did not conclude their votes as of last night, and some were counted. And, I'm speaking for Lagos now. In some parts of Lagos, they said the voters will continue voting this morning. They gave them, that extension. So I would like to know if it's the same thing over there in Anambra State.
Well, I won't be able to give you accurate data as to that, if the voting will spill to this morning, although we'll still check around. But we know that most of the polling units we visited yesterday, even if they had a large crowd of people who had not voted after the deadline had been crossed at 2:30, people were still voting till about 7:30, and they were able to conclude voting and voting, sorting and counting in that polling unit, and some other polling units we visited. So if there will be at all, I think it will just be minute number of polling units where they will have to continue voting this morning. But majority of the polling units we visited yesterday concluded their voting exercise.